Mira had always been a quiet child, the kind who tried to blend into the background whenever she entered a room. She enjoyed watching more than speaking, listening more than sharing, and observing more than taking part. When her family moved to a new city, everything around her felt strange. The buildings were taller, the streets were louder, and the people seemed to move so fast that she often felt left behind. Before she even had the chance to catch up, starting at a new school only added to her worries. On the first morning, she walked beside her mother with her small backpack pulled tightly against her shoulders. She tried to look confident, but her steps were slow, almost hesitant. Her mother gave her a comforting smile and squeezed her hand, but Mira couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a place where she didn't belong. When she entered the school building, the sound of children laughing and talking filled the hallways. They all seemed to know one another, moving in groups and greeting friends loudly. Mira kept her eyes on the floor and hoped no one would notice her. She took a seat at the very back of her new classroom, choosing the desk that seemed the quietest and safest. The teacher introduced her briefly, but Mira only gave a small nod. As the day went on, she tried her best to follow the lessons, but she couldn't help feeling everyone's eyes on her from time to time. It wasn't that the students were unfriendly, they were simply curious. A new student always attracted attention, and Mira wished she could disappear. During break time, she watched the other children play outside from a distance. Some were running, some were shouting happily, others were sharing snacks. Mira sat on a bench by herself and swung her feet, pretending she didn't mind. But deep inside, she wished she could feel comfortable enough to join in. She wished she could just be part of the noise and laughter. What most people didn't know was that Mira carried a secret she had held close for years, one that gave her comfort when nothing else could. She knew how to play the piano, better than most children her age. Music had been a huge part of her life for as long as she could remember. Her mother had taught her the basics when she was only 4, and since then, Mira had spent hours practicing at home. The piano wasn't just an instrument to her, it was the place where she felt brave, strong, and completely herself. But Mira never bragged about it. She didn't like talking about her skill, and she certainly didn't want anyone at her new school to know. The thought of standing in front of strangers and playing made her chest tighten. She was afraid they would judge her, or worse, laugh at her if she made even the smallest mistake. A few days after joining, Mira learned that her class had a weekly music session. She wasn't bothered at first. Music class usually meant group singing, clapping to rhythms, or listening to simple melodies. She thought she could stay in the back, participate quietly, and avoid drawing any attention. When the day arrived, she followed her classmates to the music room. It was a large, sunny space with posters of musical notes on the walls and shelves full of instruments. But the thing that caught her eye instantly was the upright piano, standing near the front of the room. Its polished surface reflected the bright lights, making it hard for her to look away. She felt a sudden warmth in her chest, a feeling she always got whenever she saw a piano. She slowly walked to a seat near the corner and sat down. She didn't want the teacher to think she had any interest in the piano. She wanted to stay invisible, just like she had been trying to do since the day she arrived. Her music teacher for the year was known for being strict. She wasn't unkind, but she always expected students to follow instructions immediately and didn't like when someone looked distracted. Mira could sense the teacher's watchful eyes moving across the room as the class settled. The class began with simple warm-up, singing a basic scale and clapping to a steady beat. Mira did everything quietly but correctly. She hoped the teacher wouldn't notice her. She tried to sit perfectly still, hoping no one would ask her anything. But despite her efforts, Mira felt something shift in the atmosphere when the teacher glanced in her direction. Not in a harsh or angry way, but with a kind of curiosity. The teacher probably wondered why Mira sat so still, or why she avoided meeting anyone's eyes. Maybe she thought Mira didn't want to participate or wasn't paying attention. The teacher began calling students one by one to come to the piano and try a small exercise. It was nothing difficult, just a few simple notes that even beginners could handle. The students went up with wide smiles, enjoying the chance to tap the keys. Some played too hard, some mixed the notes, some giggled nervously. But the teacher stayed patient with all of them. Mira's heart began to race the moment she realized what was happening. Eventually, the teacher would reach her name. She didn't want to go up there. She didn't want to touch the piano in front of the class. Even though she knew she could play well, the thought of standing in front of everyone made her hands tremble slightly. She kept her eyes glued to her shoes. Maybe if she didn't look up, the teacher would skip her. Maybe the bell would ring before her turn came. But with each passing minute, more and more students finished their turn. The list was getting shorter, and Mira knew she had no escape. A quiet fear settled in her chest. She remembered all the times she had played at home, how confident she felt sitting on her familiar bench, how natural the keys felt under her fingers. But this wasn't home, and these weren't her parents listening with warm smiles. These were students who barely knew her. This was a teacher who already seemed unsure about her. She wished she could explain that she wasn't refusing to participate. She just didn't want to be put on the spot. She didn't want anyone to see her tremble or hesitate. Even though she could play complicated pieces, her fear of attention froze her in place. When the student next to her returned to their seat, Mira knew her turn was next. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears. Her fingers fidgeted nervously in her lap. She wished she could disappear, vanish before the teacher called her name, and yet, there she was, quiet, nervous, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. She didn't realize it then, but this moment was the beginning of something she would remember for a long time. A moment that would reveal a part of her she had kept hidden for so long. A moment that would change the way her classmates saw her, and perhaps even change the way she saw herself. But for now, Mira sat still, trying to steady her breath, hoping there was some way to avoid the piano that stood shining at the front of the room, waiting for her. Mira sat in her seat, trying to calm her breathing, hoping the teacher might change the plan or forget about her. But deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. Her classmates had all taken their turns at the piano, and the room felt quieter now, as if everyone sensed the moment was building toward her. Even though she wasn't looking up, she could feel the teacher's eyes moving closer to her row. When the teacher finally said her name, it wasn't loud or harsh. It was spoken in a clear, steady voice, but to Mira, it felt like it echoed through the whole room. Her heart gave a jump, and her fingers tightened around the edge of her seat. For a second, she wondered if she could pretend she didn't hear it, but she knew that wouldn't work. Slowly, she stood up. Her legs felt stiff, almost weak, as though they didn't want to move. She could sense the curious glances from a few nearby classmates. Some looked bored, others looked interested, but no one seemed cruel. Even so, she wished she could avoid all their eyes. She walked toward the front of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. The piano seemed so big now, so close, almost too shiny under the bright lights. She could see her own nervous reflection on its surface. She tried her best to swallow the lump in her throat. The teacher didn't smile at her or encourage her, but she didn't scold her either. She simply gestured toward the piano bench, waiting for Mira to sit down. Mira lowered herself onto the bench carefully, trying not to make any noise. Her feet barely touched the floor, and she tried to adjust her position so she wouldn't look awkward. The teacher pointed to a small card on the piano that showed the simple exercise. The class had been practicing. It was nothing complicated, just a short pattern of notes, meant to help students get comfortable with the keyboard. Mira knew she could play it easily, but that wasn't the problem. The real challenge was the attention, the silence, the weight of everyone watching her. Her mind raced. If she played too well, people would look at her differently. If she played too badly, they might laugh. Either way, she felt trapped. She didn't want to stand out, not today, not yet. She lifted her hands and placed them gently on the keys. Her fingers shook a little, and she hoped no one noticed. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. But before she even pressed the first note, the teacher spoke. Her voice was calm, but there was a slight edge to it, as if she had already formed an opinion. "You've been very quiet these past few days," she said. "Let's see what you can do. Try playing the exercise for us." The words weren't harsh, but they carried a pressure Mira felt deeply. A few students shifted in their seats, leaning forward as if expecting something surprising. Others sat back, uninterested, just waiting for the class to end. Mira nodded softly. Though she wasn't sure the teacher even noticed the small gesture, she pressed the first key, a gentle sound filling the quiet air. Then another, then another. She followed the pattern exactly, just as shown on the card. Her hands still trembled, but she managed to finish the short exercise. When she lifted her fingers off the keys, the room remained silent. It wasn't a judging silence, but a waiting one. Mira could feel that the teacher wasn't satisfied. "That's fine," the teacher said thoughtfully. "But you played it very softly. Try it again, louder this time." Mira felt a tight squeeze in her chest. She hadn't expected to be asked twice. She played the exercise again, louder but still careful. making sure each note was clear. Another pause filled the room. Mira kept her eyes on the piano keys, hoping the teacher would send her back to her seat now. But instead, the teacher walked a little closer, folding her arms. "You seem hesitant," she said in a tone Mira couldn't quite read. "Are you sure you've been practicing piano at your previous school?" Mira's heart dropped. She hadn't claimed anything about her skills, but the teacher seemed to think she was avoiding participation on purpose. Mira opened her mouth slightly, wanting to explain, but no words came out. She just nodded again. The teacher sighed softly, as if she didn't believe her. "Very well," she said. "Let's try something a little different. Play anything you know. It doesn't have to be perfect." Mira froze. "Play anything you know." Those were the last words she wanted to hear. She knew many songs far more difficult than anything the class had seen, but she couldn't play those here. She couldn't reveal that part of herself, not in front of everyone, not when she felt so nervous. She didn't want to show off. She didn't want people staring at her for the wrong reasons. But she also couldn't just sit there and refuse. The teacher already looked frustrated, and Mira didn't want to seem disrespectful. "Mira?" the teacher said after a few seconds. "We're waiting." Those words only made her more tense. She tried to think of something, maybe a simple melody from a children's song, something easy enough to pass as normal. But her mind was blank, completely empty, as if her thoughts had dissolved under pressure. Her classmates were whispering now, not loudly, but enough for her to sense their curiosity. Mira lowered her head and stared at the piano keys. They were familiar, but suddenly they looked strange, as if she had never touched them before. She felt small, confused, and trapped between two choices. She didn't want to look like she had no skill, but she also didn't want to reveal too much. The teacher's expression suggested impatience, and Mira knew she couldn't stay silent forever. Finally, she placed her hands on the keys again. She played a short piece she vaguely remembered learning years ago. Something plain and simple enough not to draw too much attention. She tried to keep her hands steady, but the fear inside her made every movement feel heavier. When she finished, she kept staring at the keys, afraid to look at the teacher. The teacher didn't respond immediately. Her silence felt sharper than any comment. After a moment, she said in a firm voice, "Is that really the best you can do?" The question stung, even though it wasn't meant to be hurtful. Mira's throat tightened. She hadn't wanted to show everything she could do. She hadn't wanted to be judged this way. The teacher sighed again. "I asked you to play something you know. That was extremely basic. Are you holding back?" Mira's breath hitched. She shook her head quickly, wanting to avoid any misunderstanding. But the teacher's doubt was already clear. "Go on," the teacher said. "Play something properly, something real." The way she said it made Mira feel like she had no choice left. She looked around the room quickly. Some of the students were whispering again. Others were simply watching, their eyes wide with curiosity. A few looked bored, but most were waiting for something they weren't even sure about. Mira's hands felt cold as she placed them on the keys once more. She didn't want this. She didn't want to be pushed like this. But she could also sense that the teacher wasn't going to let her go until she played something meaningful. Her heart raced so fast she could hardly breathe. Then, something shifted inside her. A quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered that maybe it was time. Maybe she didn't have to hide her talent forever. Maybe she was stronger than the fear holding her back. But she wasn't ready to make that choice just yet. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her. The room felt too bright, too still, too expectant. She took a slow breath, then another. She could sense that everyone was waiting for her next move. The teacher stood nearby, arms still folded, expression unreadable. The class watched her with a mixture of confusion and interest. Mira's fingers hovered over the keys. She knew that whatever she did next could change everything. It could change the way people looked at her and the way she saw herself. For now, all she could do was take another breath and try to steady the tremble in her hands. She didn't know it yet, but she was standing at the edge of a moment that would soon take an unexpected turn, one she would never forget. Mira stayed seated at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys. Though she wasn't playing anything yet, the room felt strangely still around her, as if everyone was holding their breath and waiting for her next move. Her heart was beating so loudly inside her chest that she wondered if her classmates could hear it. She wished she could explain what she was feeling. She wished the teacher understood that being forced to perform in front of the class was terrifying for her. It wasn't that she didn't want to learn or participate. She just didn't like attention. She didn't know how to handle eyes staring at her. waiting, expecting. The teacher stood a few steps to the side, watching her closely. It wasn't anger on her face, but a kind of impatience mixed with confusion, as though she didn't understand why this quiet girl seemed so unwilling to show what she could do. "We're all waiting," the teacher said softly, but her voice still carried across the silent room. A few students shifted in their seats, but no one said a word. Mira kept her eyes down, staring at the piano keys. She felt small, like she was shrinking inside herself. She didn't want to disappoint anyone, but she didn't want to show too much either. She didn't know how to balance the two. She took a long breath, holding it for a moment before letting it out. Maybe she could try something soft, something gentle, something that wouldn't make her stand out too much. She lifted her hands and pressed a few keys, letting a simple melody float through the air. Her touch was light, almost cautious, but the teacher interrupted her. "Try something more clear," she said. "Play with confidence. Don't just tap the keys. Let us hear it." Confidence. The word felt heavy. Mira didn't feel confident right now, not even a little. She felt exposed, like her fear was visible to everyone. Her fingers trembled again. She tried to play a little louder, but her hands were still too shaky. The notes came out uneven, not the way she wanted. A small wave of whispers moved across the room, not loud enough to be rude, but enough to remind her that she was being watched. She froze. Her hand stayed on the keys, but she didn't press down. She wasn't sure what to do next. She could feel her throat tightening. She didn't want to cry. Not here, not now. She blinked hard and kept her gaze on the piano. The teacher let out a long breath. "You're holding back," she said again. "I don't know why, but I can see it. If you know how to play, then play properly. If you don't know, that's fine too. But you need to try." Mira felt the teacher's words more deeply than she expected. She wasn't trying to be difficult. She wasn't pretending. She was simply scared. Scared of being seen. Scared of failing. Scared of succeeding too much. She took another shaky breath. Her fingers slowly fell back into position. The room was silent again. This time, she tried to play the simple melody once more. But as soon as she pressed the first few notes, she felt the hesitation building again. The tune didn't sound right. She lifted her hands and let them fall into her lap. The teacher frowned, confused. "Why did you stop?" Mira shook her head slightly, unable to find her voice. She felt heat rising in her cheeks. She didn't want to face the room. She didn't want the teacher questioning her anymore. It made her feel like she was disappointing everyone. The teacher stepped closer, her voice quieter now. "Mira, I'm not trying to pressure you, but I need to understand. Do you know how to play or not?" That question cut into her. She did know how to play. She knew more than anyone in the room imagined, but she couldn't bring herself to show it. Not while everyone was staring at her like this. Her eyes glistened for a second, but she blinked it away quickly. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want them to think she was too sensitive or weak. The teacher looked at her for a moment longer, then sighed softly and stepped back. "Let's take a moment," she said to the class. "Everyone relax." The students began talking among themselves again, though not too loudly. The sound of their voices made Mira feel even more distant. She wanted to go back to her seat and hide, but the teacher didn't dismiss her yet. As the noise filled the room, Mira let her fingers drift across the keys again, quietly, almost without thinking. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, just trying to calm herself. The soft sounds helped her breathe a little more easily. She pressed a few more keys gently, forming a small pattern. It wasn't a real song. It wasn't anything she had practiced. It was just a series of notes that felt comforting, a little tune she made up on the spot. Without realizing it, she relaxed her shoulders. Her breathing steadied. Her fingers felt less stiff. The teacher noticed the change. She stepped closer again, her voice calm. "What was that?" "Play it again." Mira hesitated. She didn't think anyone was paying attention, but now she knew eyes were on her again. She kept her head down and played the same soft pattern. The teacher watched quietly, studying her hands. "You're not a beginner," the teacher said softly. "I can tell." A few students nearby heard her and whispered to each other. Mira felt her stomach tighten. She didn't want them to think she had been hiding anything on purpose. The teacher placed a gentle hand on the piano frame. "If you know how to play, then you don't need to be afraid. No one here wants to embarrass you." But Mira wasn't afraid of the piano. She was afraid of the attention. She played the small tune again, still quiet and gentle. Her hands moved more naturally this time, the notes flowing smoothly. Something about the melody brought her comfort. The same comfort she always felt when she played at home. Slowly, the room began to quiet down again. Some students noticed her playing and fell silent. Others turned in their seats to watch. Mira didn't see any of this. She kept her eyes on the keys, letting the quiet melody fill the air. The teacher watched her closely, the frustration in her face fading, replaced with curiosity. She seemed to realize something important. This quiet girl wasn't refusing to play. She was afraid of being judged. Try something a bit longer, the teacher said gently. Mira paused. Her fingers hovered above the keys again. Should she risk more? A part of her wanted to run back to her seat and disappear. Another part of her, a small but brave part, wanted to show something real. Not everything, not the best piece she knew, but something true. She took a deep breath and pressed a key. Then another. Slowly, she began playing a short melody she remembered from when she was younger. It wasn't complicated, but it had emotion in it, a kind of softness that filled the room. The notes floated through the air like little whispers. They weren't loud or dramatic, but they were steady, thoughtful. Mira's hands moved smoothly now, more confidently than before. One by one, the students stopped talking. The room grew quiet again. A few leaned forward, surprised. Others simply listened, their expressions softer than before. Even the teacher stood still, watching with a gentler look. This was the first time Mira let herself play something meaningful in front of others, even if it wasn't a complex piece. The melody carried a small part of her heart, just enough to show that she wasn't as simple or shy as she seemed. When she finished, she lifted her hands slowly, still not looking up. The silence in the room felt different now. Not heavy, not judging, just waiting. She wondered if she should look up. If she did, she knew she would see faces watching her, some surprised, some curious. But before she could decide, the teacher spoke softly. "Why didn't you start with that?" she asked. Mira didn't know how to answer. She lifted her shoulders in a tiny shrug. The teacher didn't seem upset anymore. In fact, her voice had softened even more. "You have talent," she said. "Real talent. There's no need to hide it." Those words felt warm, but they also made Mira nervous again. She hadn't meant to reveal anything. She had only wanted to make the moment less scary. "Play one more," the teacher said gently. Mira tensed again. One more. She wasn't sure she could. The little melody had been a small step, a careful one. Something bigger felt too risky. But she could sense something changing in the room, a shift she hadn't expected. The class wasn't whispering anymore. No one seemed impatient. They were simply waiting now with interest, not judgment. She placed her fingers back on the keys and took a slow, steady breath. She still didn't know what she would play next, but she could feel something inside her beginning to push forward, something brave, something she had kept quiet for far too long. And without realizing it, she was standing at the edge of the moment that would soon surprise everyone in the room, including herself. The morning after the performance at the school auditorium felt strangely calm. The girl woke up with sunlight touching her face, but her mind was still full of the sounds from last night, the applause, the looks of surprise, and the way people had crowded near her after the performance stayed fresh in her memory. It almost felt unreal, as if it had all been a dream she had wandered into by accident. She sat up slowly and rubbed her eyes, trying to understand why her chest felt so warm. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of what would come next. She went to school that day expecting everything to feel different, but the morning looked the same. Students rushed past her. The hallways buzzed with noise. The lockers opened and closed loudly. She held her backpack tightly and kept walking, not sure if people would talk to her or ignore her like they always did. For a moment, she even wondered if anyone had already forgotten the performance. But the moment she stepped into the main hallway, she realized that nothing had been forgotten at all. A small group of students looked at her and immediately whispered to each other. Another two students nudged each other and smiled. She felt her face warm up, unsure whether she should smile back or keep her eyes down. "Hey!" someone called from behind her. She turned around slowly. It was one of the boys from her class, someone who had laughed when the teacher forced her to play the piano. His face looked completely different now, no mockery, no smugness. Instead, he looked a little nervous. "That performance yesterday, it was amazing," he said quietly, as if unsure how loud he should speak. She blinked, surprised, not knowing what else to do. She nodded and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded back, almost too fast, then hurried away as if embarrassed. She shook her head lightly. The world really had changed overnight. When she walked into her classroom, the air felt even heavier. Everyone turned toward her. Some smiled, some stared, and some simply looked at her with curiosity, as if she had become someone new. Even the teacher, who had once doubted her, paused mid-sentence when she entered. "Good morning," the teacher said softer than usual. She murmured a greeting and went to her seat. Her hands trembled slightly, not because she was scared, but because she didn't know how to deal with this sudden attention. As class went on, she tried her best to focus, but her mind kept drifting. Every few minutes, she caught someone glancing at her, and every time that happened, she felt the same mixture of shy happiness and disbelief. She never played piano to get attention. She played because it was the only thing that made sense to her. Yet now that people were finally noticing her, she didn't know what to do with herself. During break, she walked to the courtyard. The air outside helped her breathe more easily. She sat on a bench and looked at the trees swaying gently. She wanted the day to feel normal again, but she also wanted to hold on to that feeling she had last night, the feeling of being heard. As she sat there, she heard footsteps approaching. When she looked up, she saw a group of students from the music club standing nearby. They looked unsure at first, as if trying to think of the right words. One of them finally spoke. "We wanted to ask if you'd like to join the music club. We really need a pianist, and after seeing what you can do, we thought you might want to be part of something." Her heart skipped. She had never been invited to anything before, and the thought of joining a group made her nervous. She wasn't used to being around people for long, but the kindness in their eyes made her consider it. "I don't know," she replied softly. "I've never joined a club before. You don't have to decide today," another student said. "We just wanted to ask. No pressure." They smiled at her and walked away, giving her space. She watched them go and felt a small spark of something warm inside her. She liked the idea of belonging somewhere, but she wasn't sure she was ready yet. When school ended, she walked home slowly. The sky above her was painted in soft colors: peach, gold, and pale blue. It reminded her of the way music sometimes feels, gentle and full of hidden meaning. She wondered if music had brought her here on purpose, guiding her like a friend she couldn't see. At home, she placed her backpack on the floor and sat by the piano. She looked at the keys for a long moment. Her fingers were still, but her mind was full of sound. Everything she had felt that day, the surprise, the confusion, the small bits of joy, seemed to settle quietly inside her. She played a few soft notes. The sound filled the room gently, like a whisper. She liked playing when everything around her was calm. It allowed her to express things she didn't know how to say out loud. As she played, her guardian walked into the room and leaned against the doorframe. There was a proud look in their eyes. "I heard what happened yesterday," they said. "Everyone is talking about it." She paused her playing but kept her fingers resting on the keys. "I didn't expect any of it," she murmured. "That's usually how life is," her guardian replied with a soft laugh. "Sometimes the things we never expect bring us the most joy." She continued playing again, this time with more confidence. The gentle melody floated through the room, weaving around the furniture and filling every corner. Her guardian listened quietly. When she finished, they stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You should be proud of yourself, not because everyone clapped, but because you shared something beautiful with them. That takes courage." The girl lowered her gaze, shy but thankful. Later that night, she lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Her mind kept replaying everything: the new looks she got from classmates, the unexpected compliment from the boy who once laughed at her, the invitation from the music club. Each moment felt like a small door opening. She realized something important. All her life, she had been waiting for people to understand her. But now, for the first time, they had truly seen her, and not for anything she pretended to be. They saw her because of something she genuinely loved. She fell asleep with that thought in her heart. The next morning, she woke up with a calm determination inside her. She didn't rush to school, but she walked with steady steps. Today felt different, not because of the attention she might get, but because she finally understood that music could change things, not just for others, but for her too. When she reached school, the air felt lighter. Students still looked her way, but she didn't feel overwhelmed this time. Instead, she felt a quiet strength. At lunch, she found herself walking toward the music room. She didn't decide this on purpose. Her feet simply led her there. Inside, she heard a soft melody being practiced. The music club members were gathered around, tuning instruments and chatting softly. When they noticed her, they paused. She took a breath. "Can I listen for a while?" she asked. Their faces brightened instantly. "Of course," one of them said. She sat on a chair near the corner and listened. The sound was warm and inviting. She felt the music pulling her in gently, almost like an old friend reaching out a hand. After a few minutes, one student turned to her and asked, "Would you like to try playing with us? Just one song. No pressure." Her fingers twitched slightly, her heart beat faster. But instead of fear, she felt curiosity. She stood up slowly and walked to the piano. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys. The room grew quiet, everyone watching patiently. She took a breath, then began to play. The sound blended with the instruments around her. It was not perfect, but it was honest. The students smiled at each other, surprised at how naturally her music fit in. When the song ended, they clapped gently, not out of formality, but out of genuine appreciation. She looked around the room and felt something she had never felt at school before: belonging. "If you want," one of them said softly, "we'd love for you to join us." She smiled for the first time that day, a small but real smile. "I think I'd like that," she replied, and in that moment, she knew she was stepping into a new chapter, not because she had been forced, but because she finally felt ready to share her world with others. The days that followed felt brighter than anything the girl had experienced before. It wasn't because everything suddenly became perfect. It wasn't because people treated her like a hero. Life moved at its usual pace: classes, assignments, small routines that filled the day. But deep inside, something had shifted. It was as if a quiet door had opened in her heart, letting in a warm breeze she had never felt before. Every morning, she walked into school with a calm sense of purpose. She didn't rush or hide her face anymore. She still felt shy when people looked at her, but she no longer felt small. For the first time, she felt seen in a way that didn't scare her. The teacher who once doubted her treated her differently too. It wasn't dramatic or overly kind. It was simply respectful, something she had never received from them before. When she answered questions, the teacher listened. When she walked into the classroom, they didn't look annoyed or impatient. It was a small change, but to her, it meant everything. One afternoon, as she sat in the music room with the club members, something interesting happened. They had been practicing for their upcoming school event, where each club was supposed to present something. The group had been unsure what to perform. Nothing seemed special enough. Then one of the students looked at her and said, "Why don't we build something around your piano piece? The one you played that night? We can create a whole performance with it. Something soft, something emotional." She blinked, startled. "But that was just something I played. It wasn't planned." "That's exactly why it worked," another student replied. "It felt real, and people felt it too. We could shape it together." She felt her heart flutter. She had never imagined that something she played alone could become part of something bigger. The idea scared her a little. What if she ruined their event? What if she couldn't recreate the same emotion? But at the same time, she felt honored and curious. She had stepped into this club unsure if she even belonged here. Now they wanted her to lead a piece. "I can try," she whispered. They smiled, relieved. That small moment made her realize something important. Sometimes, people are waiting for you to believe in yourself so they can believe with you. They spent the next few days shaping the performance. The group sat around her as she played different melodies. Sometimes she stumbled. Sometimes she stopped halfway, unsure if what she played sounded good. But the others encouraged her gently. "It's okay. Try again. That part was beautiful. Keep that. What if we add a soft violin here?" Little by little, a simple, honest piece began to grow. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, full of emotion, like a quiet story told without words. She poured into it everything she had felt over the past weeks: the confusion, the fear, the surprise, the joy, the sense of belonging. As the day of the event approached, the air at school turned excited and busy. Students practiced in the hallways. Costumes were carried back and forth. Posters were taped onto walls. Laughter and nervous chatter filled every corner. The morning of the event, she woke up much earlier than usual. She sat quietly at the edge of her bed, trying to calm her breathing. For a moment, she wondered if she should pretend to be sick. That old fear, the fear of standing in front of people, tried to crawl back into her heart. But then she remembered something. She wasn't alone this time. She wasn't standing on a stage because she was forced. She wasn't being mocked or pushed to prove something. She was here because she had chosen it, because people believed in her, because she finally believed in herself, even if just a little. That thought helped her get ready. When she reached school, the auditorium buzzed with energy. Decorations hung from the ceiling. Families filled the seats. Teachers checked schedules. Students hurried backstage. The music club gathered near the curtain, tuning instruments and fixing last-minute details. When they saw her arrive, they greeted her with warm smiles. "Ready?" one of them asked. Her hands trembled slightly, but she nodded. "I think so." As the event began, she waited backstage. Different clubs performed before them: dance groups, drama teams, small presentations. She tried to listen, but her heart kept beating fast. She closed her eyes and took slow breaths. "You'll do great," a student whispered beside her. Finally, it was their turn. The lights dimmed. The curtains parted. The stage opened like a quiet world calling her in. She stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding. The piano stood in the middle of the stage, glowing softly under the warm lights. The audience sat still, waiting. She sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keys. For a split second, fear tried to take over. Then she thought of all the moments that had led her here. The humiliation from before, the shock on everyone's faces, the applause, the invitation, the acceptance. She let those memories settle into her chest like gentle anchors. Then she began to play. The first notes drifted through the auditorium like a soft breeze. The room became quiet, completely quiet. Even those who whispered earlier now listened with wide eyes. The music grew, not loud, but full. Her fingers moved with emotion rather than skill. Every sound carried a piece of her journey. The other instruments joined slowly, blending with her melody, until the stage felt alive with warmth. Her fear melted into concentration. Her concentration turned into emotion. Her emotion turned into something deeper, something she had never felt before on stage. She wasn't just playing, she was sharing. When the last notes faded, a stillness filled the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then the applause came. It didn't explode all at once. It grew gradually, rising like a wave. People stood. Some cheered softly. Some simply clapped with admiration. But every sound felt sincere. She looked at the crowd and felt her heart swell. It wasn't the loudness of the applause that touched her, it was the respect behind it. Her club members patted her shoulder. One whispered, "You did it," when she walked off stage. Her legs trembled, but she felt lighter than she had ever felt. Her guardian, who had been watching in the audience, found her backstage with teary eyes. "I'm proud of you," they said. Embracing her, she held onto them tightly, overwhelmed. Later, as the event ended and families began leaving, a few students approached her. They spoke kindly, thanked her for the performance, and told her how much the music touched them. Some admitted they never knew she had such a talent. Some simply said they were happy she shared it. Walking home that evening, she felt the cool air brush against her face. The sky was painted with soft evening colors. The sounds of the day still echoed in her mind. For so long, she had tried to stay unnoticed. She believed she didn't deserve attention or kindness. She thought her music was something she had to keep hidden. But now she understood something important. Music wasn't meant to stay hidden, and neither was she. That night, she sat at her piano again. She didn't practice anything serious. She simply played soft notes, letting them fill the room. She played with ease, with peace, with quiet joy. She knew she still had a long way to go. Life would still have challenges. People might still misunderstand her sometimes. But she also knew something she had never believed before. She was capable, she had a voice, and she had something worth sharing. The world hadn't changed much, but she had. Her journey, which started with humiliation and doubt, had led her to confidence and connection. And now, with every note she played, she knew she was moving toward a brighter future, one she finally felt ready to embrace.